Did you know that there are just under 8,000 PlayStation 1 games released worldwide? That's NTSC, PAL, and the glorious Japanese regions. That led me to dive into my PlayStation 1 collection and picking out 10 games that I've never played. Well, actually, I've never played 9 of these. I have played one of them, and that one is probably one of the stronger titles. So I'm going to be showing you those 10 games today. Now, I'm not going to say that these are hidden gems by any stretch of the imagination. This is the good, the bad, and certainly the ugly. I have 2 in particular that I really, really liked. But I will say this. You'll see some technical issues in this footage. Let's roll them. 75 million wires later, we are hooked up, and the first game we are playing is Livewire. This is a great game, very vibrant puzzle game, and what I really liked was depending on what level you picked, you got a different load screen. I actually thought that was really cute. The graphics remind me very much of Plock on the Super Nintendo, but that's for another story. This is a game about territory. You control one of 4 of these weird little things, I don't even know what they are, and you basically have to traverse the landscape and fill in your chosen colour. As you can see here, we are red, but there's also blue, yellow and green. It does get a little bit frantic, and the levels do vary in design. I really like that kind of eclectic nature. If you would, there's a little bit of everything. There's not just flat surfaces, as you can see, this differs mildly in terrain. There's also spheres that you can play on as well. There are of course obstacles. You bash into different players. The later levels do have different obstacles that aren't players. They're like little NPCs that do take kind of accommodation up, if you would, on the track, so you need to be careful to avoid them completely. Now, it's worth saying that this game, it's got kind of mediocre reviews across the internet, so I think it's one that you're going to have to play yourself, but be mindful that you're just watching this gameplay now and it does make you feel a little bit dizzy. So my suggestion would be to go for the wider territory rather than do the short kind of squares, that, you know, the single squares. Go for the wider stuff just to kind of avoid feeling a little bit dizzy. And speaking of what I just actually spoke about it, the different enemies, you can see here we've got ghosts and pumpkins on this level. I thought this one was really, really cool. And even though the tone is a little bit duller in terms of the colour palette, it's still incredibly bright. Again, I'm not a huge fan of puzzle games, but this one really did pique my interest. I've always been drawn to games that do have lots of vibrancy within their colour palette. Why? I have absolutely no idea. I did find at times that it just seemed a little bit too bright. As you can see, this one here, for example, the blue and the yellow really did begin to clash. But overall, Livewire is pretty cool, and I'm surprised that I had never actually heard of this back in the day, and I had not actually played it until now when I actually recorded this footage. In terms of prices, I haven't got a clue. I'll probably stick it on screen right now as to what the CEX price is, just in case it's one that you might want to pick up. So we've booted it off with some Livewire. I'd never played it, I'd never even heard of it until I was rifling through my PlayStation 1 collection. Maybe you've completed it though. 50 levels of action-packed puzzle fun. Critical Depth was released in 1997 and was actually inspired by Twisted Metal, but we use submarines here, and there's a lot to choose from. I would say the ones that I actually sampled didn't really feel that different, and this game is, I would say, average. The premise is pretty basic, the gameplay is very slow, but you're underwater and you have to fire these projectiles out at your fellow submarines. There are 3 modes that all felt very underwhelming, and I will say that the draw distance, as you can see quite here, you can barely see anything on the levels. The kind of textures pop in the further you go towards something. And again, I did say in the introduction that there's the kind of good, the bad and the ugly. I wouldn't necessarily say that this is an ugly PlayStation 1 game. I think conceptually it's fantastic, again very much inspired by Twisted Metal, but unfortunately there was just something that I just couldn't quite put my finger on that didn't quite feel right. But it might be for you. Maybe this was a massive part of your childhood, but I'm happy to say that it wasn't a part of mine, and it wasn't until I recorded this footage a few days ago that I'd actually played it at all. So you can make your own mind up on this one. This is Critical Depth on the PlayStation 1. This is Riot by Psygnosis, of course the amazing team behind Destruction Derby. This is a little bit like Speedball on the Amiga. And as I was recording my footage here, having a fantastic time, I came across some technical difficulties. You'll see that the screen starts to freeze and flicker, and I just couldn't bring it back. It started to happen on Livewire as well, so unfortunately I ripped the cable up and I had to resort to using pre-recorded footage. Please go and subscribe to everyone that you see in the bottom left hand corner. Now, if you're in North America, this is known as League of Pain, a pretty brutal title if you ask me, but it's a little bit like a handball, football kind of game. Again, you've got two teams and you have to charge up the ball to your colour, and once it is within your colour, you have to hit the ring in the middle to score a point. I was absolutely terrible at it, but I can definitely see that this is going to be a game that I'm going to be getting into. It certainly feels like a game of skill and one that you need to be given a lot of patience to, but again, if you're into Speedball on the Amiga, I think this will be one for you. It looks really good and you can really feel how just similar to the graphical style of Destruction Derby it was. The City of Lost Children. Now, I had high hopes for this, and it does look really nice in terms of the graphics and textures. It's fixed camera angles, which I'm not a huge fan of unless I'm playing Resident Evil. But basically, this is quite a dark, steampunky kind of game where this kid is sent out from an orphanage by the Siamese matrons, if you would, to go and steal a load of shit. Obviously, things don't go according to plan, and this chick gets herself into a lot of trouble with a Cyclops. But I digress. There are puzzles in this and things to pick up. It's very clunky, and my patience with it wore very, very thin. Diver's Dream is not very well known at all, so when I found it at a Nottingham retro gaming market, I had to pick it up. You're a diver and you have to do little missions and upgrade your gear basically. The better gear you have, the more adept you become at doing the missions, diving deeper. It's a very, very relaxing experience, I must say. I think for me, when I picked this 10 off the shelf, I was definitely intrigued the most with this. Again, it seems really, really nice. I really like the kind of cutscenes, even though they're very kind of static, the little cutscenes and conversations when you go back up and you have a chat with the dudes in the shop. Again, it's nice and obscure in terms of its genre. I'm not quite sure if it's like a genre that's ever going to last. You don't see many of these kinds of diving games, but this is definitely worth a look in. It's not a bad little title. I need a few seconds of your time to tell you about channel memberships. If you guys want to become a channel member, click join from the main page or the second link in the description. There are 3 tiers, all with different perks for you if you want to become a team member. Thanks for your time. Let's continue with the video. So far, I really liked the concept of Livewire. I'm not a huge puzzle kind of gamer, but I think this one really appeals to me because of the colour palette. And for what it was worth and the technical difficulties that we had, I really enjoyed capturing the gameplay footage for that one. Like you saw there, my cable completely shit the bed, and now I'm going to be looking for a HDMI cable. I'm looking at the Rad2X, but it's not in stock yet, so I'm going to be looking for an alternative PlayStation 1 HDMI cable. If you can help me out with the recommendations, slam it below in the comments. Now, what about the other 5? Z or Z is a game by the Bitmap Brothers. Again, if you're familiar with your Amiga stuff, you should know who the Bitmap Brothers are. Now, this is a nice simple concept. It's red versus blue robots, and you literally have to beat their side. Every team starts with a fort, and you basically go from there and just kick the shizzle out of one another using your army of robots to progress. If you are familiar with the likes of Command & Conquer, you'll kind of have a vibe for how this goes. So you kind of select your army and navigate them to where you want to go to be able to just attack. It's really cool, and I really enjoy this. Chill is definitely one of the ugly games on this list. The graphics and even down to the text, the font, are incredibly ugly. pay attention to how much of the slopes render in as you go down them. I really didn't enjoy this, and I do think it's very difficult to get a snowboarding game right. Chill absolutely failed at that. Cool Borders, of course, dominated the 90s and certainly dominated the PlayStation 1 era, but this was incredibly shocking, and I would suggest that you don't even buy this if you find it within a bargain bin. In fact, just put it in a regular bin. This is definitely the more well-known IP and title on this list, but I didn't discover this until about 6 to 9 months ago. Anyway, this is Contra, and I first played Contra on the NES and moving on to like Super Pro Protector, it was called over here, on the Super Nintendo. And if you're familiar with those titles, you will be familiar with this, but this is slightly different because one, you can play this in 3D, that's right, 3D glasses to be able to play this in some kind of weird 3D action. I'm not quite sure who and why you would want to do that, but this does take a little bit of an isometric angle in certain levels. It is a good game. It's certainly not the best Contra game out there. For me, nothing will beat Contra 3 or Super Pro Protector as it is known here in the United Kingdom, but I do really enjoy this game. It can be quite pricey. I think if I remember correctly, I paid about £49 for this, so certainly on this list it is one of the more prominent titles. Libero Grande? Anyway, in a world full of FIFA games, I'm picking I'm picking this game. Look how good this looks. Let's just take a moment to appreciate that for a football, or rather a soccer game, it's a football by the way, it's football. For a football game, this looks pretty darn good outside of your kind of FIFAs. So somebody did give this to me down at the OLL gaming convention last April, so shout out to, I think his name was John, could be completely wrong there, but this looks pretty darn cool. Yay, a snowboarding game that is actually good. This is MTV Snowboarding. Again, I picked this because I wanted to show something that was maybe a contender for Cool Borders. Now, unlike the chill snowboarding game that we showed earlier, these backgrounds seem to be relatively rendered. There are some exceptions, of course. Overall, the movement is a hell of a lot more fluid than what you had on Chill. I certainly don't think it gives Cool Borders a run for its money, but I think that this is a nice title, and if you're into your snowboarding games and you want to try something new, perhaps this could be one for you. I mean, of course, we've got 1080 on the N64 and on the GameCube. Again, another really nice franchise. Cool Borders, I'd love to see a revamp of Cool Borders, but if not, you know, you can always rely on MTV. The classic good old days of the 90s, baby, yeah. So just shy of 8,000 worldwide releases. Of late, and I say of late, particularly over the last 6 months, my interest has peaked in the Japanese market purely because you can get the games for a lot cheaper, and some of the games you can play with English subtitles, or you can kind of just play them natively in English, which kind of blows my mind, really. So Tommy, if you're watching, I'm going to give you a list of PlayStation 1 games that I'd really like you to order from Japan for me, please. So there are the 10. My favourite was Riot, and I really enjoyed Livewire, and the game that I was familiar with was, of course, Contra. That is a really nice game, and I think that was definitely the strongest and certainly the most well-known IP in that video section there. So over to you. Can you name 10 games that I've never played? That is your challenge. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and please wham that subscribe button. We are Team 24, with it being 2024. This year commemorates my 10 years back on this platform, so it's pretty cool. So thank you so much for the support, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.